All right, I think we can get started. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. We will be talking about HPDC third-party programs. I am Mijali Marcano, Technical Manager at HPDC, and our guest speaker, Matt Van Dynen, Sustainability Director at WAP Sustainability, will share with us how WAP supports manufacturers on creating and verifying HPDs. Thank you, Matt, for joining.
Thank you, Misha.
So I will provide a quick intro of what are third-party programs at HPDC. These are structured programs overseen by the HPD Collaborative. This is supports independent organizations that create and verify HPDs. And these programs were created to ensure consistency with the HPD open standard, improve the credibility of data reported in HPDs, provide independent review of manufacturers' disclosures, and support the use of HPDs in rating systems that recognize verifications such as LEED and WELL. HPDC has 3 programs, 2 are running and 1 new that I will present today. The Approved Prepare program and the third-party verification. And the new program is the Qualified Manufacturer program. HPDC Approved Prepare is supported by organizations that help manufacturers create HPDs. This support can come at any time in the process, from scoping your HPD project or supporting you in the midway of your project, and especially on collecting data from suppliers throughout the supply chain to be able to complete your product content inventory, and really any time where you feel that further supports besides the basic support that HPDC technical support team provides could help you with your HPD creation journey. There are 6 participants that support the Approved Prepare program, and we have a dedicated page on our website, which I will share in this chat once I finish my presentation so that you can read in details about the program and find the contact information for each of these organizations in there. The third-party verification program, it's supported by organizations that verify the content of the HPDs, that make sure that the standard was followed correctly, and that review documentation to support the data reported and the product information in the HPDs. We have 10 participants covering the Americas and Europe, and this information is also available in a dedicated page for the third-party program on HPDC website. The third program is the Qualified Manufacturer program, and we will start a pilot for this program by the end of February this month. And the goal of this program is to recognize those manufacturers that have already invested on understanding the requirements from the HPD Open Standard, or that would like to start their HPD to produce high quality HPDs. We are expecting to run the pilot program for the first 2 quarters of 2026 and see how it evolves, and all the information about the program will be available on a dedicated page on our website as well. With that, you can learn how WAP can support you in both HPD creation and verification.
So, hey everyone, I'm Matt Van Dynen, like Misha said. I'm a technical director here over at WAP. I got a bunch of things on the screen here, but I've been involved with HPDs for almost 15 years now. When I first, before coming to WAP, I worked for Shaw Floors, and my first day there, I was hired to do LCA. But my first day, they said, "Hey, we signed up for this HPD pilot thing. Can you help us figure out what it is and how to do it?" So a lot of my job became understanding the HPD standard and working with suppliers and everything like that. And that was November 2011. So I've been doing HPD since joining WAP. I've done quite a bit with HPDs, both on the preparation and the verification side. And then I also helped write the verification standard and a lot of the checklists as it relates to the HPD and that verification process. Additionally, with that, I do sit as the chair of the lead MR tag. So I keep up with a lot of that and was highly involved in the V5 process and how all of this plays into lead and what that all looks like. So at the end, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them over as well. And to that point, if you do have any questions throughout, there is the Q&A box within the webinar. So go ahead and throw them in there. We'll see them on our side and we can respond to them live or in line as they come in. So feel free to use that Q&A box. So that's a little bit about me. Who's WAP? If you don't know WAP Sustainability, we work a lot with different companies as it relates to everything sustainability. We do a lot on the reporting side, and as it relates to products, we do a lot with product transparency, healthy materials, different certification, verification, LCA. We also help companies with greenhouse gas accounting and ESG reporting and things of that nature. But for today, the reason why I was invited to come speak with y'all is really this center column here and the fact that WAP is both an approved preparer and an approved verifier with HPDC. So we've been around, we've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing it longer than I've been at WAP, which is pretty long. So yeah, happy to answer any and all questions related to any and all of this stuff. So I'm gonna talk through a couple different things and how I see preparation and verification. I am pretty unique in the fact that I've been on both sides of the coin. I also worked as a manufacturer for a long time before coming in working in consulting. And if you combine all of my experience with HPDs, declare labels, cradle to cradle, all the LCAs, I've created at least 1,000 of these things across many different industries. Very familiar with a lot of this. And so I'm going to talk through a little bit about how I view preparation and verification and some of the lessons learned that I have that's come up for me over the years. So when it comes to preparation, I want to start high level, not really focusing on the approved preparer piece right now. We'll get to that. But one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that an HPD preparation is really two different things. First is the preparation of a content inventory. Content inventory being the list of all the substances, the materials, and all the health hazards and such that come along with that. And then the second is actually using that information within the HPD builder to create the document, to create the HPD. And that results in a prepared HPD. Pretty straightforward, right? What people don't realize is that when we look at it from a time perspective, how much time does it take to produce an HPD? We're looking at something like 90-10, maybe 75-25 if we're looking at a simple product. But the vast majority of the work is in the content inventory. To say that a slightly different way, if you are picking up if you're asked to create an HPD right now, it's going to take you a while to put it together, right? The HPD builder itself and the work that is done to produce the document is fairly straightforward. There's definitely a list of questions and things that you have to do, but it's really that upstream content inventory side of things and all the work that goes into that is the vast majority of the work. And so I want to take some time to focus in on this because this is where experience building HPDs and experience working on this can really come into play and where an approved preparer can help. Of course, you can do it yourself, and the Qualified Manufacturer Program is an awesome way to get into that, but there is still a lot of work that goes into creating that content inventory. So I want to focus in on that for a little bit. What is a content inventory? Like, how do we get here, right? You start with a product. You have to choose a product, right? That's how that's why you're creating an HPD, as for a specific product. So the first step is to get to a bill of materials. And that there are many different ways that you can get to a bill of materials, but pretty much every manufacturer has a system that they use to create that BOM. That could be on a SKU specific level. So we're talking a specific color, a specific configuration, or it could be something that's a little more generic at a product family level. And there are some nuances when it comes to product families, but either way, companies know how they put together material or put together products. They know the materials that they're using because they have to buy them. They have to go to the supply chain and buy that material. And so they end up with a list of materials that are used. The problem is that an HPD is not a list of materials. It is a list of substances, chemical substances identified by CAS number. So with that, when we get this from a client, either on the preparation or the verification side, and we have that list of bill of material, or that list of materials in the BOM, the next question is, okay, so what are the substances? And inevitably someone on the other side, on the client level, will say, oh, well, this first one's nylon 6 and PET and limestone. Okay, so how do you know that? Well, we got it from an SDS in some cases, a supplier disclosure in other cases, and things like that. So this is how we know that it's there. Okay, cool. Like let's see that documentation. So once they hand us the documentation, we look at it closer. We realize, oh, okay, it's not just one CAS number. It's a couple different ones. Then we have another SDS here, supplier disclosures, and finally an SDS. And we look at it from the raw documents, right? Taking that bill of materials, pairing it with that information that is obtained from the supply chain to get to that final list of substances using the correct math. Problem is that in a lot of cases, manufacturers are not doing this step properly and not taking it that next step to say, wait a second, like maybe we don't have all of the information. So these first two SDSs, if we look at them closer, we realize, okay, well, maybe something's not being disclosed in the first one. And maybe on the second one, like it definitely says that it's 80 to 100% something, but what's the other 20%? And that assumes that it even discloses CAS numbers for those substances. So we've found time and time again that manufacturers don't actually have the full list of substances that they need in order to create an HPD. No one has ever asked these questions in the past. No one's ever looked to get down to that substance level identification, especially at the thresholds that we're looking at, in most cases, 100 or 1,000 ppm at the product level. So when I get this information from a client, I'm looking at this deeper level. I'm doing the math to make sure that we are actually seeing things done correctly. So the big thing here that we've noticed is that SDSs are really not enough. There are way too many gaps. There are way too many issues with disclosure, with proprietary information, that it really requires you to go back to the supply chain to get that data. And even if you do have a good SDS, going to that supplier to confirm the accuracy of the information is still something that's going to be required in order to ultimately end up getting verified, but to produce an accurate HPD. So we always recommend going to the supply chain, going there first, right? We use the SDSs as a starting point, but really we're going to be going to the supply chain and looking and doing that. So my advice for anyone working on preparation, with or without an approved preparer, is really starting with that supply chain, right? You're going to get the most accurate information. I've seen so many outdated SDSs. I've seen so many things that where are so many materials where information changes. So going to the supply chain, you're going to get that accurate information. You're also going to be able to get to the thresholds that you need, right? That previous example where we saw the greater than 80% SDS, that 20% is unknown, and that's going to prevent the publication of an HPD, or at least a fully screened HPD, because you don't know what's going on in there. So going to the supply chain is going to allow you to get to those lower thresholds that you want to get to. And then lastly on this is when you do reach out to the supply chain and you start working with them, you're now going to have that direct connection to the suppliers when you're looking towards optimization. And that's what everyone wants, right? Everyone wants to work on an optimized product and work towards making better products. So having that direct connection with the supplier allows you to work with them and be a team with them to help reduce that overall impact and remove some of those harmful substances. So at WAP, we've been, as I said, we've been working on this for a long time, but we've come up with our value chain chemical management system. And the idea here, apologies, Misha, but our idea here is that the HPD is not the only thing that's out there, right? It is one way of disclosing information, but there's also other requirements that are being put on manufacturers and products all the time. A simple example is a declare label, but we can also go up to cradle-to-cradle certification, PFAS legislation. We have different things around Scope 3 requirements on the greenhouse gas protocol. Like there are a lot of things that are going into or that are being asked of product manufacturers that ultimately they need the information from their supply chain. So the way that we work at it is instead of focusing on a specific project or a specific disclosure, like in HPD, we instead work at it from a systemic level. So we start by, where'd it go? Yeah, we start by looking into the list of suppliers and materials that are going into the products, or products, depending on how big the project is. We then for each material, we're reaching out to the supplier to ask for all kinds of information, right? The substance disclosure, but also things like recycled content, PFAS. I could include LCA, global warming potentials. I can include like negative disclosures for like Parkinson's will disclosures, all kinds of different things. But really the focus in a lot of cases is to get to that substance level information. That all gets pulled together into our VCCM database, our value chain chemical management database. And from there, we're able to then report out of it at a product level, whatever is needed. So that could be a VCCM report. That's a summary of the hazards associated with the product across all the different hazard lists that you may care about, manufacturer restricted substance lists, or cradle-cradle RSLs, or whatever else it might be. But we can look at it through that lens. We can also create an HPD. We now have all of the data to be able to create that HPD. And then anything else regarding disclosures or certifications or anything else that is needed, because this database exists, because it's there and ready to go. I will say this is not a quick process. This is something that takes time, right? Reaching out to suppliers takes time, a lot of time. And some suppliers are not willing to play ball. And so there are discussions that happen and a lot of things there. But the thing that we found to be most successful here is that the reason why this is very successful is that we have our is that manufacturers and especially folks in sustainability within manufacturing tend to not have a lot of time because they're tasked with a lot of different things. So reaching out with and following up with suppliers tends to be where things get skipped and where things start to slide when it comes to the preparation. So taking it on ourselves, that allows us to get to that information. Additionally, when it comes to proprietary information, in a lot of cases, we have to set up, we being WAP, have to set up NDAs with the supplier to be able to collect the substance level information by material. But we additionally write our NDAs in such a way that allows us to aggregate all of the substance level data together so that way we can disclose that, for an HPD at that substance level with a basic inventory, but that allows us to get it out there and still disclose all of the substances, but no one, including our client, knows that substance A goes to material 1 and so on, especially with the amounts. So that it really breaks free the logjam that is the proprietary information that we've seen in many, many cases. So jumping over to the verification process really quick, and I know we're trying to keep this one short, so I'll go quick, but with HPD verification, the process is basically the same, right? Verification as a two-step process. One, verify the content inventory. Two, verify the HPD. And then you get your ultimately verified HPD. And again, if we look at it from a time perspective, the vast majority of the time is in the verification of the content inventory. Now, the nice thing is, with very few exceptions, the verification of content inventory can apply to a verified HPD, a verified declare label, cradle-to-cradle certification, like whatever it might be, because it's the same content inventory. Now, of course, thresholds come into play, and what like weird things around the different special conditions and things of that nature. But for the vast majority, that can be applied to different disclosure documents and certifications. And when it comes to the actual HPD itself, there is a verification checklist, but that doesn't account for, or like it doesn't have individual line items when it comes to the content inventory verification. It's really checking to make sure that the standard was followed as the HPD was prepared itself. So it's a very different time sink involved when you're looking at verifying the whole HPD content inventory and the document itself. So with that content inventory, what's needed? Again, the bill of materials is going to be needed, which is going to end up with a list of materials and the percent in the product. But for each material, we're looking to get a documentation from the supplier that is proving that content inventory. Again, if it's an SDS and there's confirmation that that is everything, then great. Again, if the calculation for the threshold makes sense, but most of the time it doesn't, so it requires an actual supplier disclosure. And then any other documentation from the supplier that is needed regarding things like recycled content, PFAS disclosures, things like that. But anything else that's being claimed within the HPD. And then, yeah, just to summarize this again, it's that bill of materials and then the supplier documentation per material. And quick note on that, the threshold is absolutely taken into account. So if there's an unknown amount for the or within supplier documentation, but that falls below threshold, that's fine. But if it falls above, that's where that additional information is going to be needed. And on the HPD document side of things, the biggest things that we need from a verification standpoint are really just making sure that the certifications are all up to date and linked correctly, and we have documentation there. And then any claim that is being made within the HPD, that we have documentation for all of that. And then it's just a matter of going through the checklist and making sure that the standard has been followed. So wrapping up with a few lessons learned, the biggest thing that I've learned, and the biggest thing that to let you all know, especially from a verification standpoint, is that the documentation is not organized. I cannot remember a time when a manufacturer has come to us for a verification project and they've been able to get verified within a couple weeks to a month. They almost never have the documentation ready to go, and that requires a lot of back and forth, and that increases the time and the cost involved with verification. So with that, having the documentation organized and ready to go, especially working with an approved preparer, that'll help you get there. But if not, making sure that all your documentation is ready, that will definitely speed up your verification time. Gaps in content inventory are easy to overlook. I like numbers and math, and so for me, it surprises me every time when someone sends me documentation that clearly shows that it's not 100%, but it happens often enough that I gotta put it on here, right? So it must be easy to overlook. So look at the documents from your supplier, your supply chain, to see if you total 100, because if it doesn't, we can't verify it. Also, most raw materials, with very, very, very few exceptions, most raw materials that are being purchased by manufacturers are not a single substance. It's almost always a mixture. So just keep that in mind as you're looking through things. HPDs for product families require more documentation. We're not going to go into detail on that today, but you just want to make sure that there is documentation ready to go for how that HPD covers the whole product family. Section 3 of the HPD standard goes into more detail on this, so look into it. But there is more. There are more requirements for product families. And then we already touched on it, but suppliers are hard to deal with. collecting that proprietary information is difficult, sometimes not possible. Working with an approved preparer or verifier, there are steps that can be taken to help get through that. But yeah, that's something, if you're going to be talking to your supply chain yourself, that is something that comes up a decent amount. And then, yeah, the threshold calculations, just you need to track your unknowns. If something isn't listed, you need to track that all the way through into the product to make sure that it is falling below threshold. Because if not, we're not going to have it. It's not going to be able to be verified. So with that, that's the end of all of that. So if there are any questions, absolutely feel free to send them in via the chat or the question box. If anyone has any, I'm not seeing any questions in there right now. So Misha, do you have any questions you want to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any questions from the audience, but we can see your contact information. We also have the HPDC support portal where you can reach out with any questions. I shared with the audience the links to the third-party verification program and approved preparer pages, as well as the WAP website. And well, good news for Matt and other verifiers. We are working to integrate in the HPD Builder a suggested documentation check. We don't have the formal name, but kind of suggesting the manufacturer the documents that they should get ready to support the data that they have reported in HPDs. This is a project that we have and we hope to implement with this year so that this verification time and cost can be reduced. Yeah, and if you don't have any more comments, I think we can. Okay, so we have a question for you. Is there a percent based on cost or weight, or how is it determined?
Yeah, so all of the percentages are based on mass. Everything is a mass percent. So that's how we're going to approach it. If there is a concern with using mass, there are ways to do that calculation. If you have another unit, if it is cost or if it is something else, like as a good example, we were working with a wood flooring manufacturer that applied stain by hand or used the filler by hand to fill knots and things like that. And it was really just whenever a knot was needed, and they didn't know how much that was applied per square foot or whatever. So they really struggled with getting to that percent. And the way that we approached it for that one was, instead of looking at it on a per product basis, we looked at it from an annual basis and said, okay, like how much flooring are you producing? How much wood filler are you buying over the course of the year? Divide through, and now we have our mass percentage to get to that percent that showed up on the HPD eventually. So there are different ways that you can get to those numbers if you don't immediately have that within a bill of materials. And again, the expertise that you can get from an approved preparer verifier can really help with get to those calculations as well.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
We have another question, and this is actually a very common question. It's from Keith. If we already have an EPD for a product, is there more information needed for the HPD?
I get this question all the time myself.
Yeah.
Because like I briefly alluded to it earlier, but my whole career has been a mixture of LCA EPD and HPD, declare label material health. So I'm one of those weird folks that do both. So definitely can help with this one. So it really depends on the type of data that was used to create the HPD or the EPD. I'll say right off the top, if you have an EPD, using that to create an HPD is a no. The data that is used on the back end that feeds into the LCA model to ultimately create the EPD, that is the same starting point that you have for the creation of content inventory for an HPD, right? You both start with a bill of materials. On an LCA, every one of those materials is mapped to a specific data set or modeled somehow within the LCA software. And there are different levels of granularity that are available within these LCA data sets, but a lot of times you stop at the raw material. Good example is limestone, right? That's used as a filler in many building products. Within an LCA, you can choose a limestone data set and you're done. However, on an HPD, you are going to that chemical level and really looking at it at 100 ppm or 1000 ppm threshold. So you're going well beyond the what an LCA would require of the content inventory to get down to that substance level. So if you, as an organization, have already collected all of that substance information and that is used as documentation to create your EPD, then yes, you can use that same background data. However, most of the time that is not the case. So just having, just by having an EPD, do you have enough information? Probably not. You probably still have to talk to the supply chain, still have to get to that substance level data in order to create an appropriate content inventory for an HPD.
Great.
And then
Thank you.
I
Oh,
just want to
sorry.
ask, I want to ask myself one question that didn't come through in the chat. But a question I get a lot of times on preparation and verification contracts is really like, how does the cost work, especially when we have multiple projects or multiple products going on? There are definitely economies of scale, and I've had this conversation with so many other preparers and verifiers, and we all say the same thing, right? Doing one HPD, if one HPD costs X, necessarily costs 2X. 10 HPDs doesn't necessarily cost 10X. And the more that you do, the lower the cost per, because there is a significant amount of overlap for many manufacturers. There's a significant amount of overlap as you start to look at product families and supply chains and things like that. So keep that in mind. Like if you're looking to dip your toe, as it were, the cost per is probably going to be higher than it would be if you're really looking at doing it for your whole product portfolio or all products within a certain product family.
That's actually a common concern among manufacturers. So thank you for clarifying. And thank you again for supporting us, the programs and all the work you do. We can finish the event now. We will be publishing the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. And thank you all again for assisting today. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.